The anti-apartheid activist Desmond Tutu said that forgiveness is the highest form of self-interest. And I couldn't agree more, since it's so obvious that holding on and not forgiving someone is, as they say, like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Hi, I'm Deborah Poneman, founder of Yes to Success, where we share knowledge and tools to enjoy a life of true and lasting inner and outer success. You know, people do some horrible things to one another, and forgiveness does not mean condoning the behavior or letting a person back into our lives. And it's not about letting that person win. Forgiveness is a gift that you give yourself that allows the toxic resentment and anger you're holding in your heart to stop poisoning you so that you can get on with your life. 18th century British poet and satirist Alexander Pope famously said, "To err is human, to forgive divine." What he's actually saying is that when we forgive, we become part of the divine. Pope also said, when we forgive, what was an anchor becomes a sail. The word for forgive in Hebrew is salah, same root as shalom or salam in Arabic, which of course means peace. So I'm going to share with you a true story of forgiveness. The woman's name is Mary, and this is in her own words. And I believe it puts most of our stories in a new perspective. Here it goes. For years, my life was not what you'd call easy. Forced to stand up for myself on many occasions, including going through a tough divorce, I'd learned to be quite a scraper. Or is it scrapper? Either way. The truth is, I found myself upset at people and situations a lot. Unfortunately, this created a great deal of resentment and desire for revenge within me. Then one night in 1996, something happened that made all my previous upsets put together seem trivial in comparison. I woke up to the sound of the phone ringing at 3 a.m. Filled with dread, I picked it up. It was my oldest son, Jay, telling me that my youngest son, 18-year-old Robbie, had been shot. "Mom," Jay said, "Robbie is dead." In that moment, I thought my life was over. The pain of losing Robbie was overwhelming. I wanted to crawl into a hole and never come out, but I knew I had to hold myself together for my other children and to deal with the police, so I put my emotions on hold. Sean, the young man who had killed my son, was arrested and charged with murder. Sean had known Robbie, and he shot Robbie while the two had been simply arguing. He pleaded guilty, so there would be no trial, just a hearing at which the plea bargain would be arranged and his sentence handed down. I'd have to wait 3 months for that hearing to arrive. I wasn't allowed to see or speak to Sean throughout that time, which was probably wise. With my despair and fury at a boiling point, if I could have gotten my hands around his neck, I probably would have strangled him. This was my baby he'd shot. The day of the hearing finally arrived, and I got my first glimpse of Sean. As they led him into the dimly lit courtroom, he kept his eyes on the floor. Shadows masked his face, distorting his features and giving him a dark, sullen appearance. I felt a wave of white-hot anger shoot through me. Why had he done it? Shaking with emotion, I decided to not take the stand, but I told the judge that I wanted to speak to Sean after the hearing was over. Since Sean had pleaded guilty, the verdict was no surprise, and neither was the sentence, 20 to 40 years in the state penitentiary. As the judge had promised, he summoned me to his chambers to meet with Sean. I followed the bailiff down the hall, my heart beating faster with each step as I prepared to meet the young man who had taken my son's life. I'd waited a long time for the opportunity to let Sean know how I felt about what he'd done. Now, filled with rage and hatred, I had no idea what I was going to say, but I knew I wanted to let him know what he had done to my life. I was frisked and led into a small paneled office. Sean stood trembling in the corner with his hands and feet shackled, wearing an oversized orange prison jumpsuit. His head was down, and although he was 20 years old, he was crying like a baby, just sobbing his heart out. As I watched this boy, so forlorn, No parents, no friends, no support. All I saw was another mother's son. I asked the bailiff if I could approach Sean. At this, Sean looked up, revealing a childlike face stained with tears. Suddenly, I found myself asking, "Can I give you a hug?" He nodded his consent. The bailiff motioned me towards the prisoner, and I walked over to Sean and put my arms around him. He just melted, sobbing into my shoulder. It was probably the first compassion he'd had from anybody for a long, long time, or ever. As I stood there holding him, I felt my anger and hatred melt away. Still, what came out of my mouth next surprised everyone, including me. "Sean," I said, "I forgive you for what you've done." Our eyes connected for a few moments. I continued, "I'd rather have my Robbie be where he is than be going to prison. I will pray for you every day." I asked Sean to keep in touch, and then the bailiff escorted me from the room. After that, Sean left for prison to begin serving his time. I felt little satisfaction at this. Robbie was gone and no sentence could bring him back. And yet there was another boy whose life was destroyed. Both of his parents said they wanted nothing to do with him ever again. So Sean and I began corresponding. And for the first 5 years of his sentence, I visited him regularly. In fact, I was his only visitor. Then Sean was transferred to another prison where the warden there did not allow the victims' families to visit, but we still write often. Some people don't understand how I could do it, but I've learned that forgiving doesn't mean condoning. I believe the compassion I felt in the judge's chambers that day was a gift from God. I know I could not have healed the deep, dark places of hatred and revenge embedded within my heart and soul had I not forgiven my son's murderer. Forgiveness set me free. It gave me the peace that I needed to get on with my life and eventually come to terms with Robbie's death. Since then, I've become what's called a Stephan minister, a type of lay minister through my church. I help people through crisis or loss in their life simply by listening and just being there. It requires very little except commitment and compassion, two qualities I have found in great abundance in my heart since the day I forgave my son's killer. I learned that you only hurt yourself when you hold on to anger and resentment. Now, despite what happened, I feel truly peaceful and happy. Hatred and revenge won't bring back my beloved Robbie, but Sean is someone's son too. The hatred has to stop somewhere. What better place to begin than with me? So that's Mary's story. And now I invite you to ask yourself, is there something that someone did that you can't forgive? If Mary could forgive her son's killer, then maybe you could forgive the person who has wronged you. Maybe you could see him or her as God does, as an innocent child, because we are all God's children. You might even want to close your eyes and speak to their soul and tell them that you understand now that they were doing the best they could, given all of the hurt and the pain they endured in their life. Maybe they were bullied or unloved or invisible or unwanted. You can even say to them in your heart, I feel what you did was not okay, but I know you are so much more than that, and I forgive you as God forgives you. The person's hurtful actions can't be changed. It's in the past, and there's absolutely nothing that can be done to change it now. But ask yourself, is what they did worth closing yourself off from all the amazing grace that's waiting to shower down on the other side of forgiveness? This person may never change. They are who they are. So just take a few deep breaths as you accept the truth of that. But you also need to accept that that person did whatever they did because they are also in pain. They are also wounded. They may not even realize it themselves, but it's there. People only hurt others. because they are hurt themselves. See them through the eyes of compassion for their own suffering. Imagine they're a child that's hurting, lashing out at others in their own pain. We can't afford to withhold forgiveness. Nothing will destroy our own lives more surely. As Martin Luther King famously said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Hate will surely destroy the hater. You're not your past. The only moment is now, and you are perfect, you are whole, and you are loved by the Creator more than you can imagine. Again, it's okay if you still feel angry, and it's up to you if you're not ready to let go. But the purpose of this message is to suggest that you might be ready to begin to release the pain in your heart, not to excuse anyone for their actions. And as the anger begins to dissipate, if you want to now contact that person in third dimensional reality, that's fine, but it's not necessary. It's already complete on the level of your soul. It's up to you. If you do want to connect with that person, but if you do it without any expectation. Expectation diminishes the grace. Don't contact them to get something. If you do it only to give. And if you do take that next step, whatever transpires in the third dimensional world that we live in, and we can't predict what it'll be, it's perfect, even if it's not what you wanted. What we do know for sure is that if you can forgive, if you can embrace forgiveness with no expectation, the result will be an even greater space for grace and all good things to come in to your life. So I send you love and all the blessings that your beautiful heart can hold.